morning, everyone. Welcome. As usual, I'm sure we'll have people keeping on trickling in as we get started, but we've got some content and 3 speakers to get through this morning, so I want to hand over to them fairly quickly. Good morning to everyone. My name is Stacey DeKelmer and I manage sector development here at the Queensland Council of Social Service, or QCOS as you may know us, and we're the peak body for community services in Queensland. We do lots of work spanning across the sector, and some of our work does focus on poverty, disadvantage, the cost of living, which is where this webinar comes in, which is all around the SPER hardship partner program and SPER debt. So welcome to all of you, and thanks for your interest in this particular program. We think it's of great value to many of your organisations to be aware of this program and the consideration of becoming a partner yourself. Your organisation. Now, before I hand over to Deb, our first speaker, I would like to acknowledge the Yagara and Turrbal people. It's on their land that I'm sitting on today in Meanjin, Brisbane. I'm in West End, right near the river, which is a beautiful place to be. And I'd like to acknowledge their continuing connection to this place and to these waterways and thank them for the care of this land. And of course, I extend that acknowledgement to any First Nations people on the line and to the land that you're all on, coming from across Queensland today. Okay. We have got 3 speakers. We have got someone to speak about the SPER hardship program itself. We've got Tash, who's going to be speaking to us from the perspective of a financial counsellor who uses this program in her work. And we've also got, sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. We've got a 4th speaker, it's the frog in my throat. We've got Barbara, who's going to be speaking to us about her academic work in researching debt from her perspective and reflecting on the research that she's already done. So we've got some really interesting things to share with you today. Now, I'm going to hand over to Deb, our first speaker, who's going to be talking about the program itself. And as we go through the session, please know that we'll be sending you a post-event email after this session that will have any resources that we talk about and any useful links, as well as a copy of the slides. So please don't feel like you need to be writing everything down. We will be sending that to you. Any questions you might have, you're welcome to pop them in the chat and we'll keep on top of that. Okay, Deb, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Stacey. Good morning to everybody that's joining us today. I love doing these presentations about SPER. It's a big eye-opener for a lot of people. I think at the time there's a few misconceptions with regards to SPER. So I'm going to start the presentation and we'll just make sure that the sharing is going to be working for us. All right. So can everybody see that first slide?
Perfect.
It should have about SPER on there. Fantastic. All right. So again, thank you to you, Stacey, for inviting SPER into the meeting today. I'm going to provide you with a general overview of SPER and what its functions are, and then just a little bit about the Hardship Partner Programme. So my name is Deb. I'm a Senior Stakeholder Management Officer with the Engagement Collections Division of the Queensland Revenue Office. So our team consists of our manager, Matt, and 3 other stakeholder management officers. And we were established about 7 years ago with the aim to encourage stakeholders and strategic groups across Queensland government, local government and community organisations to collaborate on issues impacting end-to-end penalty debt management. We work with those groups as well to deliver services so we can work together when assisting all clients. I've been with the stakeholder team for 4 years, but with SPER for 12. And the aim is onboarding organisations to partner with us and work towards giving our hardship clients the ability to finalise their debt by non-monetary means. All right, so we'll start the overview. Hopefully. Technical errors already. My apologies. Okay, I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment because it seems to have died on me.
This is always the way. We do
Yeah,
practice,
absolutely. Look,
everything's
I've
working
been
fine.
yeah, absolutely. I've been sitting in this room for the past hour just making sure all is going to work. So obviously that's not the case. Okay. All right. And I'll attempt to share my screen again. Oh dear, please bear with me.
It's all good. You've got our attention anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, which I'm grateful for. Okay, so. All right, so everybody can see that
Yeah, we
screen
can
there?
see that.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. So a little bit about SPER. SPER is responsible for the collection of enforcement of a range of fines and orders. So it's important to note that we don't actually issue fines or court debts. We're responsible for managing those fines and orders that are registered with us from the issuing or referring agencies. So our role is to work with government departments and authorities to modernise the management of the end-to-end process of issuing and recovering debt for the state, and to work with government and non-government organisations to provide realistic options to our clients to work off their SPER debt. Okay. So what happens when a debt comes to SPER? So this slide demonstrates where we come into the end-to-end penalty debt management process in Queensland. So the individual or organisation that has been issued with a fine or court order will receive an infringement notice or a court order. And depending on the issuing agency, they may also receive a reminder notice. So for instance, on an infringement notice, such as a speeding fine, a person can pay in full, or if the total amount outstanding is $200 or more, they will be offered a voluntary instalment plan by the issuing agency. So this payment plan requires an initial $60 payment to the issuing agency, and then from there on in, it will be $60 a month until it's been paid in full. And it does register with SPER, but it's only for us just to keep an eye on it to make sure all the payments are coming through. If the voluntary instalment plan defaults, a SPER registration fee will be applied. Okay, so there is a registration fee at the moment for any fine that registers with SPER, and there will be an additional fee of $78.20. And an enforcement order will then be issued from SPER, allowing a further 28 days for payment to be made before enforcement action begins. A person can dispute the infringement and will be provided the opportunity to fill in a stat dec, discuss the matter with the issuing agency directly, or apply for a court hearing. So that's all to do with issuing agencies such as Queensland Police, Department of Transport and Main Roads. We also receive fines in from the courts. Now, the court orders get to us very quickly, usually the next day after a person has appeared in court, and the person will be given a period of time to pay by the magistrate. If they fail to make payment in that time, then the debt will register at SPER, and then they're open to enforcement action. In these instances with court orders, the registration fee for SPER isn't applied because the courts add their own administrative fee. That's called an offender levy, and it's already applied by the courts at the time the order is made. So just to give you an idea on that one, an offender levy on top of any fine that is handed down for a magistrate's court is $138.10. If the hearings are at a Supreme or Districts Court, then the offender levy is $413.90. So you can tell there's a considerable difference there.
Deb, can I ask a question just at that point
Yeah.
around what determines for people's information, why would it be going to different levels of court?
Well, it depends very much on the offences. I mean, that isn't, obviously, if it's a more serious offence, then it will go to the Supreme or Districts Court. For your everyday offences, then we generally see that people will just appear at the Mags Court. Okay. All right. So what happens when a debt comes to SPER? So we can take a variety of enforcement actions, with some enforcement actions also incurring an additional fee of $131.05. So we can suspend driver's license. So that means that the individual cannot drive in Queensland. We can clamp, seize and sell vehicles. Okay, so this means that we may mobilise a vehicle if an individual or organisation owes $5,000 or more. There is a legislative criteria that must be met before we take this action, though. So this action is usually targeted at high value, we call people debtors at SPER, people who are non-compliant, and debtors that decide that they're not going to pay but can pay. There's lots of investigations that go off in the background with our senior investigation team. So this is the stage really where they'll be looking into, what vehicle does this person own? Is it encumbered? Is it worth SPER seizing the car and taking it to auction to make that money back that's owed on fines? So the other thing they'll look at as well is a person's background. If there is somebody, as I say, that is in hardship, most of the time they'll move away from that. So somebody that's on a Centrelink benefit wouldn't necessarily fit into this category unless they've done other investigations and they can see that there may potentially be assets that are there, and if that person indeed is working. So we do investigations with Facebook that gives us a lot of information too. So, well, we've got people that, are on a Centrelink benefit and receiving those benefits. Further investigations can prove to us that they may be running a business as well. So once we get to this stage, this is where it gets quite serious. It takes a long time to get to this stage because we do give people a lot of chances to get in touch with us. So like I said in the beginning, we will give somebody, once the fine registers with us, we will give that person another 28 days to get in touch with us. And then we will start sending out warning messages then. The driver's license suspension is obviously the best form of enforcement for us to begin with, because nobody wants to be without the driver's license. So we send out not only paper correspondence, but if we've got a mobile phone number on file, then we'll also send out SMS messages warning people to get in touch with us. Okay. We can take money from wages and bank accounts. Monies can be taken either as a one-off amount, or we can set them up with the banks for regular amounts. And we can register an interest over property. So that means that when an asset is sold or transferred, the amount owed to us must be paid to remove the registered interest first. So you can see how important it is really, and we put a lot of faith in our hardship partners, getting these processes over to your clients or your participants, just to let them know of what can potentially happen if they, we're here to talk to. So we need to know what's happening with somebody, and working as an advocate for these people, and Tash will attest to this. We don't know what circumstances are unless people actually do get in touch with us. Is everybody okay with that one?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so how your clients can resolve their SPER debts. So we've got options in place for clients to resolve their debt. So they can pay in full by going onto our online service tool. They can enter into a manageable payment arrangement using a variety of methods to do so. So we've got direct debit, or it can be through a Centrelink benefit. A payment can be deferred in a payment plan, or we can defer enforcement action from occurring for a short period of time. So for instance, if somebody has lost their job, if there's medical reasons, or if there is a victim of domestic violence. Clients can apply for a reduced instalment plan, and this would often mean sending in supporting documents such as bank statements, medical certificates. These would generally be approved by a team leader. Eligible clients can apply for a work and development order, which we're going to discuss a little bit further today. All right, hardship. So SPER considers there to be two types of hardship. So we've got short-term hardship that arises to a temporary episodic event, as I said before, such as a medical reason, financial or natural disaster. So if there is a natural disaster such as bushfires and so on, we will apply blanket holds on people's files until it's safe to take those off. Longer term hardship that arises due to a systemic underlying condition. So that can mean long-term financial hardship, serious addiction, homelessness, a medical condition, intellectual disability, incarceration, and domestic violence. Options available to clients identified in hardship are temporary deferrals of payment, which will stop potential enforcement action. And then again, reduced hardship payment plans of work and development orders. SPER's offer to a client who is in hardship will depend on the client's specific circumstances. So there isn't anything set in stone. It's case by case. Once we're aware of what's happening with that person, then all those things will be taken into consideration. So for somebody that is having medical treatment, for instance, generally what we would do is apply a month's deferral once we're advised, and we would ask them to send in supporting documentation. Victims of domestic violence, on their initial phone call, once they let us know that they are a victim of domestic violence, we will apply a 3-month deferral to a file. And then our domestic and family violence team will get in touch with the victim and discuss what needs to be done from there on in. We've just, probably about 12 months ago, we have set up our own team now that is dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence. So just with the work and development orders, if you are a hardship partner and you've got a client that is going through domestic and family violence, we wouldn't be looking at setting a work and development order up for that person to begin with. So the steps in place with the specialised team, they will apply that 3-month deferral, as I said. They will then send out paperwork, whether it be to the advocate for that person or the person themselves. They're asked to send in details of fines that don't belong to them. So a lot of the time we find that, some of the debts that have been incurred by the perpetrator. They've been driving the car that's registered to the victim. So there's quite a few processes involved in that. And I'm quite happy to send through, all the details with regards to that particular team too. All right, so let's have a look at the next slide. So we are partnering with trusted community organisations and financial or health practitioners to assist vulnerable people in the community. Examples of these partnerships are All Right, mental health and substance use disorder units. So we have Metro North on board as well. We have all Salvo stores across Queensland, Vinnies and Queensland Correctional Services. So at the moment, although corrections are approved for all of the correctional services, they have decided that they just want to start with the 4 low security correctional centres. So the programme assists people with their rehabilitation and just basically getting their lives back on track. So for somebody that is completing a work and development order in a rehab centre, well, then the goal there obviously, is to assist them with that. But in the same token, the idea of walking out of that rehab centre and not having a SPER debt as well, obviously helps towards the rehabilitation, and the same for the prisons. So we've got a couple of external organisations that go into the prisons and deliver programs as well. So that's, another option. But again, we see some great numbers coming out of the prisons. Everybody is very keen to get on board. All right, next one. So there's two different types of hardship partners. So we've got sponsors and we've got advocates. So a hardship partner sponsor is an approved community organisation, government agency or health practitioner who will assess the suitability of their client for a work and development order depending on the services they are receiving and the client's eligibility. So to give you an example of that, for instance, for the organisations we have on board that offer the activity of unpaid work, they would come under the eligibility of financial hardship. So we see a lot of people that are on Centrelink benefits for these particular activities. And the eligibility document that they would need to produce would be a Centrelink income statement. Okay. The partner will make an application for a SPER WDO on their client's behalf, outlining the activity their client will be undertaking under supervision. And a sponsor can then create a work and development order for their clients. And sponsors also have the ability to apply short-term deferrals. So when I say short-term deferrals, in the hardship partner portal, when you become a hardship partner, you will have the capacity to assess for a work and development order or apply that deferral. And the reason we give people that option is that we may have somebody that's just been released from custody. They can't provide the documentation that's required straight away. So we put our faith in the hardship partner, by saying, I'm going to apply a 3-month deferral until this person can actually get all the paperwork to me. So with that deferral, it will stop all enforcement action while all that paperwork is being gathered. Okay. An advocate, so a hardship partner advocate is an approved organisation who can recommend payment plans. They can also apply for deferral of payments as well. So with the advocates, we generally see that these people are accredited with the Financial Counsellors Association of Queensland. Obviously, the expectation is that person will do a financial assessment with their participant, and then they will then add to that person's file. They will have the ability to have the hardship partner flag. Once they hit that in the portal, that will actually be activated on that person's SPER file. So if their client or participant brings SPER, or they go on to the actual client website and they want to set a payment plan up, then that should guide them directly to the lower payment scale that we've got in there, because they've been assessed by the advocate. Okay, does that make sense? Everybody good with that one? Hardship partners can be both sponsors and advocates if they're, suitably qualified. So again, that's another option for the, organisations that have got accredited financial counsellors on board as well and delivering areas in the financial counselling area. So not only will you have the ability to create the work and development order and the deferral, you'll also have the ability to apply that hardship partner flag. So potential benefits of the hardship program. So obviously there's a reduction in an individual's SPER balance. It certainly does reduce the stress and anxiety. We do see an increase in engagement and attendance, and also helps with social and emotional well-being. So we've already seen the benefits of the program. A good example of this would be a partnership that we've got with the ICANN, so that's the Indigenous Consumer Assistance Network. So amongst other remote locations, I can actually visit Lotus Glen Correctional Centre, and they deliver financial counselling and their Yarning Money program. So Lotus Glen has a high population of First Nations men. There's always been a reluctance on their part to contact SPER. Thanks to ICANN now, we've got the gentlemen on board with the WDOs, and they're not only reducing the amounts that they've got outstanding with SPER, but they're actually acquiring about the program availability for when they're released. there's been a huge step forward. Before the program was introduced into the correctional centres, typically there would have been no contact made, even though there is a free phone in all Queensland correctional centres. Enforcement would have continued on these files because SPER doesn't get advised when somebody is incarcerated. So we put the onus on centres management when they first go in to let everybody know that there is a SPER phone. If somebody picks that phone up and calls through to SPER, we will ask questions. Are you on remand? Have you been sentenced? And then we will do searches with QCS if we've got somebody that's been sentenced, just to confirm those details. But picking the phone up is the important thing, so we can stop that enforcement action while they're actually incarcerated. Okay. All right, work and development orders. So the work and development orders allows for participation in approved activities under the supervision of an approved sponsor to discharge SPER debt in lieu of monetary payments. The activities serve to help the client overcome hardship circumstances, for example, participating in life skill courses. Helping people get resumes and job ready is another good activity. Or they can provide direct benefit to the community. Again, a good example of that would be the unpaid work activity. So we have a lot of Salvation Army sites on board who are different to the Salvos. A lot of these Salvation Army locations have churches attached or community centres. So with the unpaid work, they would go in, they would assist in the community centres with setting up. If there's any meetings going to be happening, they would look after the maintenance of the building to a certain degree. They would help with the gardening, just to, you know, obviously keep the place looking really good. And in the meantime, working off the amount that they've got outstanding with SPER. There are some debts that are excluded from work and development orders. So court ordered payments to a specified person or entity. So for instance, restitution or compensation, they're not WDOable. They are owed to a victim of crime. And those monies aren't able to be worked off on a work and development order. They will always be something that needs to be paid to that victim. As it stands today, I did a quick calculation this morning. So we've got 238 hardship partners at the moment, and they're spread across 739 locations throughout Queensland. We've got a handful of interstate hardship partners. So we understand that people do move from state to state, and there's no reason why we can't take hardship partners on board. If you've got somebody that's moved to New South Wales and they've got Queensland fines, then that seems to be working pretty well at the moment as well. We even go right down to Tasmania. So we have a hardship partner down in Tasmania. Out of that 238 partners, we've got around 30 partners that between them deliver all of the approved activities in areas that are classed as rural and remote. So we're now looking at being able to move further up Queensland and get into those areas that previously had been hard to get into. Yesterday, I got an approval through for Livingston Shire Council. So that is one of our identified areas that we really want to start breaking into. Okay. Hardship Partner Portal. Well, I might let Tash just let you know how easy this one is to use. So once approved, hardship partners will receive a link to the Hardship Partner Portal. It's easy to use. Sponsors manage their own accounts, manage your own users, search for SPER clients, and apply and manage work and development orders for eligible clients, or do add those hardship partner flags. There's been a few concerns with some organisations about the extra administration time this program takes. So we can offer a run through at a later date if you'd like to, just of how quick and simple the portal is to use. And that'll include how to report hours once a month. for people's participants. How to register. All right. So all of the details are available on the SPER website, including the participant pack and application form. But I was thinking, Stacey, I don't think I sent those to you previously, but I'm going to get those off to you so you can send those out to people that have joined us today.
Great.
We're continuing to build the program with organisations, and we've seen an increase in information being requested through other agencies that are interlinked with already approved hardship partners, and they're sharing the benefits of the program for their mutual clients. That's pretty much it from me with regards to the quick overview. I think that, as I say, the next thing is, we do get people that are very keen to have a look at the portal. So if that's something that you'd like to arrange, Stacey, later on, that's fine. We can do that too. So basically, we just like to say thank you to you, Stacey, and QCOS for giving us the opportunity just to give you a small insight into SPER and the Hardship Partner Programme. I'd also like to take the time to thank Tash as well, that I volunteered to you. So Tash, thank you again for your ongoing support for the programme.
Thanks very much, Deb.
No
I'm going to pause here and ask if anyone has any questions for Deb about the program itself. Well, if you think of something, feel free to pop it in the chat or take yourself off mute to ask. And as Deb says, we'll be sending out the resources to you after the session. I'll hand over to Tash at this stage. So Tash, as I said when we began the webinar this morning, is a financial counsellor and has various experiences in dealing with SPER and debt. Tash works at both Law Right and has been involved in the MARA project also, so can speak about this in a couple of different contexts. So thank you for your time, Tash. Would you like to share with the group a bit about the value that you see in administering the project and what you've learned about the program?
Absolutely. So firstly, thank you everyone for joining. I've been a SPER partner through a couple of different places, but I think coming up about 4 years now, I think, Deb. I think I was one of the first financial counsellors registered. So a lot of that was all baby steps, and I'd have to say, yeah, Deb has been amazingly supportive through everything, like every little question there is about hardship partners and how we do get involved in any sort of tricky little things and things like that. So basically, I'll start out with what the value of being a hardship partner is. One of the things that I found extremely good and very, very quick is when I see a client, I'll usually ask them about any fines or SPER or things like that. Because a lot of times without us realising or discussing it is some of the clients have attended our appointments on a suspended licence because they've had to value one thing or the other. Do I, get to the appointment to get the assistance, or what's happening? So generally I'll that's one of my very first intake questions. And within that, it's like, okay, well, what we'll do is have a look if it's SPER related suspension, license suspension. It's literally, I think, the easiest thing on earth. Takes about 2 minutes, if that, going through the process, having a bit of a look, putting on a deferral, and then by the time you log out, refresh the screen, the suspension's lifted. So, and that's without exaggeration. That is the quickest thing. So as Stacey mentioned, I have 2 employers that I work with, so 2 sort of different avenues. So one of them I actually go into a correctional centre, and I work with the clients there, and we sort of spend a lot more time going through, what are your fines? Are you aware of your fines since you've been in custody? Because generally they've gone from 1 or 2 different correctional centres and things get lost. So one of the very valuable things I found with that was going back a little bit with when I was going into the prisons with Law Right, was one of my clients, she had a young baby in custody with her. I said, well, let's have a look at your fines, things like that. And it worked out that her ex-partner had been driving her car while she was in custody. One of the fines in particular was over 40 kilometres over the speed limit, which was an automatic 6-month suspension. And so I ended up getting her movements history, just got a couple of different things like that. So having that little bit of access in the beginning and to have those conversations, I ended up getting all of it reversed for her. She was able to then, it was around about $6,000 worth of fine, so not just a small amount. In the likelihood with this client, when she was leaving custody, she would have just got in the car, had a young baby in there with her who was special needs as well. She could have been picked up while on parole, and then, so yeah, being able to have that time and understand that some of these ones are definitely not them because they're in custody at the time. So that was a very, very good outcome in that sense. The other thing is also in another circumstance with working with SPER is it's been able to allow me to see clients that would have fallen through the cracks as well. So by having people know that I'm with SPER as an advocate and a sponsor, is that's part of that normal conversation. So there's a lot of clients that would either have different spelling of their names. And so now it's very much a habit that I will say, how about we have a look at whether or not you may have multiple, and Deb would be able to say as well, is that some people have multiple accounts due to different spelling of their names, but all of those accounts still have the same consequences if you're not compliant. So I've been sort of teaching as well with sentence management and places like that as well to, hey, just double check that they only have the one account so we can address. And that's a very real thing and something that's been more and more common as well. So with that process, it's just merging the files together and then, doing the normal process as well. The other thing is also just about how approachable and how understood our voices are as workers with people that are frontline with clients. A lot of those is with thanks to like Kim Easton, who's, way up there, like Kim knows, and Daniel. They've actually a lot of times taken into consideration that people have been disengaged with SPER for a very long time. They avoid the phone calls, avoid everything, because one of the biggest things is I cannot afford what they're wanting me to pay. And generally, most common I've seen is about $250 per fortnight. And so people just sort of back off. My conversations, which have been received quite well, have been that even let's just set aside somebody's background of disengagement and all of that. Once they're engaged with an organisation, let's just give them a clean slate. Let's just say, okay, they're engaged now. Let's just see how these people go. So put them on very minimal payments. Let's review in 6 months. Slowly step them up, because otherwise, if you're going in really big and hard, they're unsustainable, especially in today's living expenses. And you just don't know, like, people live in the day, not, the next fortnight. So I found that my opinions and my suggestions are very well received. And I've been able to have multiple Teams meetings and conversations around what does and doesn't work. Because I knew initially when all of this started with SPER, it was baby steps, and it's still baby steps. So it's not an us and them sort of situation. It's like, okay, how can we work together to see the best outcome for the client? What things may be easier with SPER along the way as they grow as well with this particular program. So with some of those as well, it's been able to assess, like Deb mentioned before about family and domestic violence. One lady came and saw me. She would have easily fallen through the cracks through her coming to me because of being with SPER. When we were talking about it, there was a lot of fines, just shy of $3,000 that weren't hers, but she was in a real situation where if she had have transferred those fines to the person that was liable for those, the consequences and would have been just far outweighing the worth of it. So I did go through the process with the family and domestic violence application. And yes, just shy of $3,000 of her fines were completely withdrawn. They weren't transferred to anyone else to respect her safety as a person and her family. And to be honest, that one was very little information provided. It was a fully redacted IVO. So there was a lot of trust element there that I've assessed the client as well, and it's made a huge difference, you know. So without being a partner, that would have been missed. It wouldn't have been a discussion. It would have just been, you know, how's everything going? Also, sorry, bear with me a sec. So the actual application process, I've been through it 3 times. So, and I've found that it's not intrusive. It's been on average about 6 to 8 weeks from start to finish. You know, you've got your usual things of, you know, at least with myself, I just provide my financial counselling association membership. And then, you know, the agency provides their insurance details, different things like that. So that it's not overly intrusive, considering when you weigh up the benefit that you have with clients. I've only just started using the WDO process in my work with prisoners, and that's been really good. Like, I've opened up, had a bit of a look with it, quite easy to navigate your way through there. One of the things I found really well, especially with working with people that sort of feel like there's not a lot to go through, it's very empowering to even know that TAFE is involved, because then that way people have actually said, oh, wow, I was wanting to better myself. I was wanting to do something else. It's like, well, now you can sort of, you know, 2 birds, 1 stone. And I think that's been amazing, because that sort of shifted a lot of where clients are actually setting goals for themselves and actually wanting to go through with different things. So part of my role is to work out what services they're already engaged with, working out which ones would be better as well for them to approach as far as a WDO. Also, I have other places contact me about what my thoughts are with working with SPER, and then also getting them in touch with Deb, and then them going through those processes, because I think to be honest, I think it does seem quite daunting if you're not used to it. But like I said, I've been through it 3 times with registration process. It's actually not too bad. There's no cap on, you know, you've got to have 100 clients every couple of months registered on there. There's nothing like that. It's like, it's something that is a backup for people that walk through your doors. It is something that could prevent, especially with deferrals, something that can prevent clients getting into further strife than with the police or anything like that. With the prison aspect of things, one thing I do say to a lot of people is that a lot of people are in custody due to something that's to do with the law. They've broken the law. This is what's happened. In this aspect of working with SPER, because it is illegal, you know, there's legislation around all of these sorts of things, is that I find my clients then get to experience a positive association with law. And it's a lot bigger than just being a SPER partner and we can get a reduced payment or things like that. It's actually giving them a positive connection there, and that empowerment. The other thing with the reduction of payments, the ones I was talking about before that are usually around $250, I'm generally getting clients on there for about $10 a fortnight, because for me, it's about sustainability, and for clients to know that they can get this, you know, as this little amount, which is a lot easier for them to be able to budget with. As they step further, yes, increase it maybe $5 each time, you know, every couple of months, and then just sort of slowly tier it. And But it's about getting people to stay compliant with a lot of these areas. So if it's $10, it's $10. And clients are very, very happy with that. And at least that way, everyone has met their requirements. They're paying things off. So I'm sort of rattling on a bit. But what's the other ones? So especially in custody as well, I've found, so one of the ones I work through is Helena Jones, and literally clients are crocheting. And then the positive side of that is that they say that they would never have done this before. And then they found that it's actually quite calming, it's grounding, it's a new skill. Like, even though, you know, especially when we all become nanas and everything and grandmas and we want to crochet something, it's something that people have actually taken as this is a timeout. It's a mental health grounding process as well. So I do hear that a lot from prisoners. And then I also work out at one of the parole offices. So generally when people go there for their parole catch-ups, we will do a bit of a screening. So then that way I'll check as I go into there. Anyone can just pop in and we'll just go, hey, let's just get this SPER thing sorted while you're visiting your parole officer. Then I'll do a bit of research on their fines as well, and then just say to them, are all of these yours? Are any of these ones that you want to dispute? And then also with Law Right, we have a lot of my colleagues that they're lawyers and they can actually go through the disputing process with them too. So at the end of the day, clients are being heard and the options are there. So hopefully I've covered everything.
That was really useful, Tash, to hear your perspective of, you know, because obviously you're quite close to what the service users or client's perspective is, working alongside them. So really, really valuable to hear that side of things. Did anyone have a question for Tash about what it's like to use the program? You must have covered off on all the questions anyone might have had. So thanks very much, Tash. Really, really value that that perspective from you, and it's good to hear it's not a complex system for you to be navigating. Yeah, as a financial counsellor.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Barbara, over to you.
Hi. Awesome.
I should probably say more than just that. To everyone.
I mean, if you like.
Barbara is a PhD candidate with the School of Social Science over at UQ. UQ? I've got that right, haven't I? Yes.
Yep.
Who's doing some, is partway through a lengthy stint researching this particular topic. So Barbara is going to be sharing with us some of the things that she has learned through the process and sum up some of that research that she's done. Thanks, Barbara.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I don't have to introduce myself now. I will take a second to try and figure out how to share my screen. Don't mind me. You'd think after doing my honours year during 2020, I'd be a lot better at this by now. And that one. Yeah, so I'm, as said, Barbara. I'm PhD candidate at the University of Queensland, and my project is actually on work and development orders and how those are experienced by individuals who are, participating in them, and also by the people delivering them, so the NGOs on the ground working with individuals. So now Canva's not going to let me do the thing. There we go. But we've heard a fair bit about work and development orders already, so I'm going to take back to a bit more about what we actually do when we're collecting FindEd. And it was touched on a little bit. There's a bunch of different kind of responses. The traditional response, and I say traditional, if you're in Western Australia, traditional means like 3 years ago, because that's when they stopped being able to incarcerate people for not being able to pay their fines. The traditional response was to arrest people if they defaulted on their fines. And you could also, for a long time, elect to spend time in prison in order to repay your debt. That did a lot of things. For one, it skyrocketed the prison population, and it's also been acknowledged and like highlighted as being a major contributor to the disproportionate rates at which Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples die in custody. So part of the role of SPER, of establishing SPER, was to try and get the money, like collect money from people while using alternative methods and avoiding just straight up incarcerating people for not being able to pay their fine back. So we've got payment plans, enforcement orders, all these different kind of options, and now work and development orders available as well. So payment plans are good. You know, as you said, there are a lot of ways to be able to pay back really small amounts over a really long period of time. That's awesome, except that at the same time, debts accumulate. So this is some information from the Queensland Audit Office, went and had a look at how we're actually, you know, what's going wrong in collecting SPER debt. Why have we got so much outstanding? And basically, people are just not able to pay them off. So as you can see, that people who are experiencing financial disadvantage have far more fines on average than, and almost, yeah, more than double compared to the average SPER debtor. So it doesn't matter how small the payment plan is for an individual if it means that they're in debt for the rest of their life. And it's just accumulating and accumulating and accumulating, which is, you know, a big part of why work and development orders were expanded to include more people in the first place, is there's this need for it. Because you can see this accumulation happening even at a spatial level as well. So this might take a little bit of explanation, so bear with me. What these maps show is they show the amount of increase in the number of debts per debtor in postcodes. So how much that's changed from January 2017 until December 2019. So our ones in my very professional little guide I've got here with the lowest amount of increase. So that's the 10% of suburbs that most of them have actually reduced the number of debts per debtor over that time. And so, yeah, this was all pre-COVID as well. And you can see them in this light blue, and ones with the highest level of increase. So these are the postcodes where debts are just piling up. They're adding on and adding on. And on average in this postcode, they've increased. These are not like massive, you know, increases. They're small, but they are very significant. And one of the things you can see, so this is over here on the side is a little close up of Brisbane. And it does actually these places that are increasing, they tend to be more disadvantaged areas. It's a bit hard to tell when you're looking at postcode level data, because within a postcode, you'll have multiple suburbs and they might have varying degrees of socioeconomic capacity, basically. But it does tend to cluster in more disadvantaged areas. And you can also see this as well, because the suburbs that were more likely to have like higher increases in the number of debts per debtor were also more likely to have higher proportions of people who were experiencing unemployment, who earn individuals who earned less than $800 per week, individuals living with a disability. So this particular information was based off census data from 2016, and living with a disability in this case was requiring daily assistance with day-to-day activities. So that's a pretty conservative measure of disability, and also had high proportion of residents who identified as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. So it's really not only are people experiencing other forms of disadvantage who are already experiencing, low income, disability, but then the fines are clustering on top of that as well. So this is kind of unsurprising, right? Like it's not a huge shock, but it is an issue because it's taking away resources from already disadvantaged areas. Because the other thing that we know about disadvantage is that it clusters in place and it spirals. And so the more that fine debt clusters in a place, that's just another resource being taken out of the community. And so you can see a need to have, a way to be clearing some of these debts when people don't have the capacity to pay them. Whoop, going too far. So based on some of the other research, and a lot of this is out of the US, and in fairness, the US is a bit different to Australia in a lot of ways. They've got much higher, in some states, you can basically be charged rent for being incarcerated, and they include that sort of debt in these studies. So it is much higher amounts of money we're talking about. But there's also evidence from Australia that shows that these things are happening as well. So one of the studies from the US showed that being in a long-term payment plan really caused a lot of anxiety for people, and people described it as feeling kind of trapped, and they were constantly scared that they would miss a payment. And it didn't matter whether there was an actual likelihood of experiencing a severe sanction or being incarcerated if they missed a payment, but it was just the possibility that there could be caused this really, really profound anxiety for people who had long-term debts. Other collection methods that we use in enforcement orders, like license suspension, they can cause impossible choices. If your license is suspended and you can't get to work, like was mentioned earlier, you're risking driving on a suspended license. That risks being caught. If you're caught for driving on a suspended license, you tend to get a further extension and another fine, which you're already not paying off. It just escalates. And as well, keeping up with these repayments, and this was another study in the US, for a lot of people meant falling behind on other expenses like food, rent, medicine, child support. We already see that with people on low income having to sacrifice access to medication that they might need. For people who are living below the poverty line, as I'm sure everyone knows, even a small amount of money coming out can be a lot and make a huge difference. So all of these things kind of come together to create what some researchers are calling a hidden pathway or a hidden punitiveness of fines. So while we are avoiding incarcerating for fine default directly, right? We're not like, oh, you can't pay your fines, jail. Sometimes the way that we're collecting it can create these little bits that add up to being incarcerated. The more you come into contact with the criminal justice system, the more likely it is that you will end up inside the criminal justice system. And that's what can start to happen. But research on that's still kind of new. So work and development order is a solution. Hopefully, right? Hopefully, but we don't actually know everything about work and development orders. Don't get me wrong, they are not new. Things like this have been used in Europe and Germany and Scotland for ages, and they do help reduce stress for people. They help people be able to avoid defaulting on their fines, avoid ending up in jail because of it, which is more of a possibility over there, from what I understand, than it is here. But on the other side of that, all of the ways that we've evaluated these sorts of programs has been around, like, what they're using as measures are things like, did people complete the program? Has it reduced the amount of fine default? And those are completely valid measures. They are important, but they're not the only thing. So what they haven't looked at is actually how they're experienced by people. And the reason that's important is that some of those programs had really, really high dropout rates. Like 40% of people were not finishing the program. And without asking people what their experience with the program was, you just have no idea why, right? Which is where my project comes in. So this is my current project that I'm doing, which is looking at how work and development orders impact the lives of individuals, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I want to find out more about what it is and how people are experiencing them, and not just the individuals participating in it. I'm also interested in understanding how, understanding this from the perspective of people who are facilitating these programs, who are hardship partners as well, and how it impacts, you know, their day-to-day in delivering them, and also how they're able to work with clients and that sort of thing as well. So hopefully soon I'm going to be starting to recruit and ask for people to be, volunteering to participate in some of these interviews, so that we can learn a little bit more about kind of the other side of work and development orders, not just the money side, or the how much we're able to get back, but actually what impacts are these having on the people they're designed for? Is it kind of doing what we're hoping it's doing and helping? So yeah, if you're interested in potentially participating, shameless plug, I'm going to need participants soon, so feel free to reach out. I've got my email there, and I'll pass more details on to Stacey as well. And that's it from me.
Thanks very much, Barbara. And as you were speaking about the level of anxiety that some people can experience in accumulating debt, it really made me think about Tash and her comments about building trust and being able to navigate that process with people. It's such an important part of alleviating the stress and anxiety. They're on people who are already vulnerable to different situations, and great to hear that this system, the partner program, is reasonably easy to navigate, and Tash has had a good experience over a number of years of using the program to assist service users and clients. So looking forward to seeing the outcome of your continued research, Barbara, and learning more about how we can I bet spoken like a true PhD candidate. Learning more about how we can assist service users in engaging in these different systems that do help alleviate some of the strain that fines can cause them. Were there any other comments, questions from participants? Yeah, Jordan's got a question here. If you have somebody with a massive debt doing repayments, but it is long-term, can they qualify for work and development orders to help minimise their debt, or is it just those that qualify for hardship?
Well, so it's very dependent. We were talking before, and I did touch on the financial hardship side of things, but each activity has its own eligibility criteria. So just to go back to the people living with a disability, so an eligibility criteria for that has got its own little classification, if you like, for eligibility. So we would be looking for, or the hardship partner would be looking for the eligibility document for a declaration signed by an appropriate professional, or in fact, it would be a Centrelink income statement that does state that that person is on a disability support pension. Okay. Now, when it comes to people that are on very low payment plans, they're generally on low payment plans because of the situation that they're in. So, you know, you're talking about your Centrelink recipients, you're talking about people that are working but are on a very low income. Okay, so they will have been assessed, and they will have been assessed correctly. Once somebody goes in to do a work and development order and they're signed up for it, then the reality is they're in compliance with the work and development order, and the actual instalment plan can be cancelled at SPER. If the whole amount that they've got outstanding is, I'm going to say, WDO-able, then they don't need to have a payment plan in place as well. Does that help? Yeah, like I said previously, if there is an amount that's owed to a victim of crime, that will always be payable, and the working development order can go ahead, but the participant just needs to realise that once they've worked off all WDO-able amounts, that they will still, you know, have to set a payment plan up for that victim of crime. So basically, WDO is a form of compliance. If everything is WDO-able, there doesn't need to be a payment plan in place, and that payment plan can be cancelled.
I just wanted to add to that, if that's okay, is I think also understanding the order in which things get paid off with SPER. I think that's for when you're seeing clients and you've got that face-to-face, is being able to let them know. Because one of the questions that I've found people say is, why is it coming off these things but not coming off these? And they're thinking it's to do with age. A lot of people think that once they make a payment, is it spread across? So I think that's one of the things I assume should be probably discussed and delved into a little bit more as well.
Yeah.
And like with what Barbara said as well is, so I've been doing this for about 18 years, and I've worked in Western Australia back when I've had clients go into custody for fines and things like that. I've worked in the Northern Territory and Victoria as well as here. So a lot of times, yes, I think in Queensland we're a little far behind with some things, but certainly in these few years, there's been a lot of progress forward, and knowing that everyone's working together for the outcome of the client as well, and the warrant for seizure and sale, those sorts of things, I've had those lifted as well. So it's about just engaging and SPER not being a dirty word anymore. I think that's probably one of the things, and being able to look at all the different jurisdictions across Australia. That's been something that I've been looking into as well. And I've just sent a thing through, which is the double punishment, which was done for financial counselling. And part of that, I think it's in 4.4 of that report, is about fines. And one that I found in Northern Territory was where you've got the obligation, when I was working remote, people have their obligation to drive auntie and uncle somewhere. And that is far above what the police or anyone else could do to you. If you say no to auntie and uncle, you've also got all of those cultural things. So there's a very, very big aspect that hasn't had a lot of consideration when you have people going into custody because of the fines. And then as part of the custody, they still get out, they've still got the fines there. So it's trying to work with people and going, well, you know, what's your everyday life? What's your you know, are you seeing counsellors? Are you, you know, all of those sorts of things. So, hey, let's try to work all of these people in. And if they're not enrolled or, you know, signed up with SPER, it's like, just ask, you know, it's.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a culturally appropriate program as well, which is good that you've touched on that, Tash. So the culturally appropriate program is for the remote and discrete areas. And for example, one of the qualifications there is to be a recognised elder, so auntie or uncle of the community, and just having those yarning meetings with the younger people, you know, that in itself becomes a WDO for hardship partners that are in those areas. So yeah, we're fully aware of what happens. That, you know, they haven't got access to paperwork, they haven't got access to Department of Transport and main roads. They don't bother that the car's not registered, because how are they going to get it done? They don't, you know, licensing wise. I mean, we're on at the minute with getting into the meetings for the licensing muster that's going to be happening up at the top end, which is great, because I'm sure we'll learn things from that too. You know, when we send mail out to those places, generally they go to a post office in the middle of nowhere, you know. So we need to be looking at time frames surrounding that? Obviously, those people aren't going to get those that mail or whatever it is that we're sending out to them in the time that is set for everybody else. So there's still a lot of learning going off, but the culturally appropriate programs for those remote areas is really taking off now. So yeah, it's definitely something that we're broadening our horizons onto and getting a better understanding of it all.
And just to add on to that a little bit, and to what Natasha said as well about, you know, SPER being a dirty word. One of the good things that Queensland's done really well for quite a long time is having the one place, not having to go deal with a bunch of different debt collectors chasing you up for different types of fine debt. It all consolidates. But the kind of interesting thing that happens is, I mean, obviously there's a lot of distrust for the criminal justice system, and in a lot of ways that's very justified. And while SPER itself is not technically a criminal justice thing, it does act as this quasi criminal justice actor, right? And so it gets, it becomes part of that distrust. It gets that label as well. So the idea that there are things to access that, you know, everyone's on your side to be helping, and to actually trust enough to reach out, to engage in an enforcement order. I've actually, since I've started this, had a bunch of different people go, hey, my housemate or hey, my friend has this, keeps getting all these letters from SPER. And I'm like, dude, just call them. You're going to lose your license. Like, you have to open them. Please call them. Because just explain what's going on. As long as you're paying something or sorting something out, it'll stop. And just that complete avoidance happens for SPER as much as it would for any other criminal justice actor that's lost that trust in the community.
Yeah, it's always better to open the letter. Annette's got a question or a comment.
So I had trouble unmuting. We at Anglicare in Roma offer life skills courses, but what
Okay, Annette, you broke up really bad there. I got Anglicare in Roma and life skill courses. Were you asking if that would be looked at as an approved activity?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely it would. So that would come under the activity of educational, vocational, life skills activity. Okay, that one pays $50 an hour. So, you know, if you're delivering that program in Roma, which again for us is a place that we'd really like to start expanding into, then, you know, please feel free, you know, to give the team a call. I will send all the details on to Stacey so she can get them out to you, which will include the participant pack. So you can have a look through that yourself. And just see where Anglicare fits in that. But on what you've said there, you would absolutely fit into the criteria. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Annette. Are there any other questions or comments? Oh, Sharon has asked, could driving skills course be an approved activity? Again,
that would be something we'd have to look into, Sharon. It depends very much where the funding comes from for that activity. Do your participants get that funded?
Just curious, Sharon has said.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, the reality is for those driving skill courses, what we generally find is that they are for people that are in receipt of a Centrelink benefit. And that's only to date so far. So yeah, again, depending on where the funding comes for that, I mean, that's definitely a further conversation we can have just to, understand a little bit more about the courses that you offer in that area. Certainly open to conversation on it.
Cherie has said, great to hear about the real experiences of SPER payers collaborating with advocates and how these options have improved their situations in different ways. Thanks so much. I agree. Thanks, Cherie. It's been really valuable, I think, to hear the different facets of the experience. That's been really good. All right.
I just had a thought. Sorry. When for people applying for WDO programs, if they're applying on like the basis of mental health issues or substance abuse issues, if they don't currently have, access to a doctor or a psychiatrist, because we all know that everyone's very much booked out at the moment, what kind of happens with their getting those proof documents? And
what we generally find is with the rehabilitation centres that we've got on board and psychologists, so we do actually have our own psychologists on board as well, not SPER psychologists but hardship partner psychologists. You generally find that there is somebody that has got the experience that fits the eligibility that we're looking for in those rehabilitation centres. Okay, so they don't all work on referrals. I mean, somebody will, approach a rehabilitation centre. I'll just find you now. Just bear with me. So mental illness, for instance, eligibility would be a declaration that attests to the nature, severity and duration of the illness and its impact on the ability of the customer to pay their SPER debt, signed by a treating doctor, psychiatrist or other mental health clinician or health practitioner. So that there's somebody will have seen somebody previously, even if it's, their treating doctor, then that would be an eligibility document. So the participant would need to provide the hardship partner with that. Okay.
Yeah, I guess my question along that though is more if they don't have access to that doctor, because you can see it as well in people who are experiencing homelessness, or if someone has moved, if they don't have access to that doctor anymore necessarily. How do they go about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. And of course, with the rehabilitation centres, we generally find that participants can be quite transient as well. So, they don't always have any documentation, or they've moved miles away from where they first started off. So most of these rehabilitation centres have got their own doctors signed up with them. So if somebody does turn up at one of the rehabilitation centres and they've got capacity to take them, then they will generally use their treating doctor for the diagnosis and for the eligibility document.
And sorry, I'm just hogging all the questions now. If that is the reason for requiring a WDO, are the rehabilitation centres kind of the only option, or are people able to do other forms of like volunteer work or that sort of thing to be able to repay that debt?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, then if they're not going to be a part of that rehabilitation centre and the treatment plans there, then yes, like I said, in the presentation, we've got all of the Salvo stores on board, all of the Vinnie stores on board. And if they're going to fit that criteria of financial hardship, so Centrelink income statement would be the eligibility document in those circumstances. So it depends very much which activity that person is going for. Just because they may be suffering from substance use disorder, it won't stop them going on and getting a work and development order for unpaid work. There can only be one WDO at a time. So, if what we see with, for instance, the substance use disorder, that's a treatment plan. They will start the working development order with that. And then as they go through that process, they'll then move on. They graduate, I guess is a good way of putting it. And then they'll move out to maybe some of the properties that the rehabilitation centres have got. So it's not a treatment plan then, but they will still be receiving counselling. So it'll be an ongoing, support for that person until the day comes where they've graduated completely. If there's still an amount left outstanding once they've gone through all of that process, that's then when they can go and, approach one of the Salvo stores or the Vinnie stores and say, right, I've got this much left outstanding with SPER, I want to work it off that way. So, yeah, I mean, it depends very much what situation the person's in and what stage they're at.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you.
Tash, you've got your hand up.
It's just a quick thing as well, is that once, as a financial counsellor, once I've assessed financial hardship eligibility, and then I just go in, tick a little box in the portal. One of the things that is a question for a while is that, we don't have cases open forever and a day, is once it's ticked in the portal, my understanding is that it stays ticked.
Correct.
So even once they go beyond us being a client, which to me adds empowerment for the client to be able to phone up and say, yes, I'd like to, because some people choose to do that themselves and me do it. But once I've ticked the box, they're aware of, they're able to request a lower repayment rather than what's provided to them. So I think that's quite important as well, that we don't have to keep people on our books as open for them to still benefit from being assessed under financial hardship eligibility.
Yeah, that's quite right. And with that box, again, it's automatic. The minute you tick that box, Tash, that appears on the SPER file. And that's on what we call the dashboard. So on the front page, they'll see it straight away. So if there's a phone call in, the service officer will take that into consideration and that will guide them to the reduced instalment plan. And on top of that, if they choose to go onto the website and set up a payment plan, because that box has been ticked, again, it will take it to that reduced instalment plan. And that box will stay on unless the hardship partner takes it off.
Thanks, Deb and Tash. There's a question here from Cherie about, is there a list of partners that provide WDO opportunities?
Yes, there absolutely is. So when I send all that information through to you, I will send the link through. So there is a link on the SPER website to the SPER hardship partners that have agreed to be advertised. So we do have some hardship partners that don't want to be advertised, and that's for a number of reasons. It can be down to capacity. It can be down to the fact that they only work off referrals. We don't know what capacity a hardship partner has. And you made a very good point before, Tash. We don't say when you sign up as a hardship partner, right, well, we expect you to have 50 people go through your books, a month. We don't say that at all because we don't know what your capacity is. We leave that to you. And if it gets to the stage, where you can't offer anymore and you've decided to advertise on the website, that's a quick email in to say, take us off the website, we're full to capacity. So all the time, it's the hardship partner that, that's what this team is here for, to make sure that the hardship partner is happy with the way it's going. And in the same token, we don't expect hardship partners to take abuse either. So, if we've got somebody that has been abusive to a hardship partner and that WDO gets withdrawn because of that abuse, that comes through to us. We can see on this end then that, if they ring up and say, that they'll have a bit of a, probably a moan at this end, which would then, that would prompt me to get in touch with the hardship partner and just say, give me a bit of background with what happened with John Smith. All those notes would be made on the SPER file as well. So people are aware that, this person can potentially be a little bit volatile. We don't expect hardship partners to tolerate that. So at no stage do we say you have to take this person back. It's the decision is entirely the hardship partners.
Thanks, Deb, for that. All right, we're nearly at the end. So is there any final questions or comments from anyone before I close off? Michael is going to thanks for the discussion. It's always good to have some discussion at the end there. Michael's going to pop a quick poll up onto the screen, which will ask you how you found today. Here we go. I can see it popping up now. Hopefully you can all see that. Would really value your feedback so that we can continue creating sessions that are valuable to you in your work. And our sector development team here at QCOS is starting to plan for next year. So if you have any particular skill development areas that you've noticed in your organisation, in frontline work, or some more strategic things that you would like to see QCOS offering as far as information, skills that you'd like to work on, we'd love to hear from you, because we are starting to gather thoughts and ideas for our sector development program in 2024, which sounds a bit funny to say, but that's at the point of the year that we're at. I'd like to thank Deb, Tash and Barbara for your words and for your time. This morning it's been really good to hear more about this program, and lots of things for all of us to have a think about as far as service provision goes into the future. So if you have any questions, you feel free to get into contact with us, but look out for that post event email, because we will be letting you know all about the resources that were mentioned today. And of course, if you're interested in participating in Barbara's ongoing research, you can get in touch with her to discuss. But thanks to all of you.
Please do.
Yeah. Thanks to all of you, and enjoy the rest of your day.